Hello, this is Mr. Crayton's classroom management plan. So the big thing in any art classroom is the idea of having routines just because there's so much different things going on in a typical art classroom. So say for example, students might come in and I'll introduce something to them and demonstrate it like a new concept or technique. We'll practice as a group, so a controlled practice, and they'll practice on their own. So the idea of a student knowing what to look for and what to do when they come in is extremely important. So the idea of that entry routine where they'll check the board. So typically I would use a projector screen that either has a Microsoft Word document with information or a PowerPoint presentation. And they would check that out so they know exactly what they need to do and grab. So they would calmly grab materials from their storage area and then also grab anything they need from the counter. It's really important too when setting up an art classroom that the areas are set up logically so that way there's not a bottleneck when the students enter the room. So let's say when they were to come in the room, they would check the screen as soon as they enter the door. They would grab any materials that are for that class period from the counter, and I would place those about several feet from the door so they can just kind of funnel in, grab those materials, and then go to their boxes in the back of the room. So then once they do that, they can have a seat. And then also they can either talk for about 2 minutes or begin their warm-up activity or their project or assignment if they're already working on one. So I like to give them about 2 minutes so they have kind of a warning so they know how much time they have to grab their stuff. And also that 2 minute gap gives them a chance to be able to kind of release a little bit of energy and talk before I have to start giving instruction and before they need to calm down. So the key too is just because there is a lot going on, so to make sure that there are transitions between those things and also signals. So I normally utter phrases that students are used to. So if I say demo, they know that they need to grab their sketchbook and any drawing supplies, or they need to have those out so we can begin working. Also, if I say it's about that time, they know they have about 2 minutes or so to, or depending on the class, 2 to 5 minutes to clean up before the bell and tone sounds. Also, because a lot of times I'll be working with students one-on-one, they know that they should be raising their hand, or they can also raise their hand and quietly call my name just so that way they get my attention and I can come over to help them. So, and then the last key is also make sure you have an extra routine. So after I say it's about that time, students know to put away their materials in their storage area. And the key, of course, is to have this as a routine. So they've done it a few times, they're used to it. I don't need to give them any instruction. They just know they should do it. So they also have to clean up their work area if they made a mess, because that key is to make sure that I'm not cleaning up after them. They're taking care of their business and making sure they're doing what they need to do to be a successful student in my class. So once they do that, they return to their desk. I love to have them at their desk just so that way they're not kind of wandering around the room, because that's when problems can occur, and also so that way they're not just standing by the desk, or sorry, standing by the door. That's one thing that students like to do, so they can be the first one out of the room. But again, that also causes problems because then they're kind of getting into things. So it's nice if they can just sit at their desk and just calmly talk for about a minute or two. So the key to have a classroom that's going to be run well with routines, and also to keep things consistent, I want to have general expectations. So there's expectations that they follow every single day, and that students are respect the instructor, meaning me, each other, and the classroom materials. So to break that down, I want to make sure that they're speaking to each other as Christians, because I would plan to always be at a Christian school, and then build each other up. So that would exclude offensive language and offensive phrases that aren't appropriate, and that's one thing that we try to clear out of the way right in that first week, and also make sure they're using materials for their intended purpose. So we talk about the idea of what respect means in this classroom, and the idea of how we talk to each other as Christians, so that way there's no gray area in there. So, because in an art classroom, there are various work days, or say, for example, they might be working on a project for a week to a week and a half, depending on the difficulty. So I need to make sure there are rules for those days so they know what the expectations are. So they know they should be seated and working once they have their supplies. They know they need to also talk at an acceptable noise level, and we talk about that too as well, so they don't distract others, because it's okay for them to talk. I don't ever want them to work silently unless we need to for something specific. Because it's good for them to be able to talk. Also, talking helps them encourage each other too. Say, for example, if someone needs to problem solve with something, they can help each other, which is excellent. But they need to make sure they do it in a way that doesn't take anyone else away from their work. They need to actively work on something. So, in case they do finish early, there are art library books they can work on to practice skills and techniques. They can also work on something from another class, but they have to actively work on something so that, again, they're not distracting each other and they're not, again, distracted themselves. So if they cannot do that, there are consequences. So level one, typically they receive a verbal warning, and then I kind of go back to what the classroom expectations are for either the general or the work days. And I try to approach it from a law and gospel standpoint. I love for them to be able to talk with me and have a dialogue. So I refer to them as to why it's important to follow those rules and how they can follow those rules. And the key is to kind of build them up as they go and have that forgiveness in there so they realize that it's okay to make a mistake, but how can we get better going forward? If a student still struggles with that, we have a level two. And the idea is to give them a processing form so that way they can write that down and try to get a plan for themselves. And normally at this point, I'll normally communicate with the parents and guardians what we're doing as far as that processing form, and also contact their advisor so we have a digital trail too as well as what's going on. And if the behavior is really blatant, then it's possible they could also lose time management points for not working on the project, especially if they're distracting other people. Level three, that's where a referral will be issued. I'll still talk to the parents and the advisor, but also get the dean of students involved. And depending on the severity of the behavior, sometimes the consequence might just go straight to level three for referrals, depending on what the school has set up for those things. So why is this important? This is important specifically because as Christians, I want to make sure that students are using their God given abilities to produce the best work they can. And also, the idea too is using that God given ability to honor God. And if they're working to the best of their ability, they are honoring God, but also the fact that the idea of distracting each other and taking each other away from their work, Romans 12, verse 10, has to do with that, the idea that you're going to honor each other through the way you carry yourselves and through the way that you work. So you honor God by being successful, and it's important that students do remember that in my classroom.